The meeting room on the alien flagship was silent. The kind of silence that presses against your chest and makes every heartbeat sound loud. Commander Elias Rowe felt it as acutely as if the walls themselves were listening. He had made a simple comment, an almost innocent observation about the curves of the alien ship's hull. And now Representative Shathara sat across from him, eyes narrowing, her posture rigid. He couldn't tell if she was angry, confused, or something far more alien to human emotion. Elias's mind raced. In all the years he had studied alien cultures, he had learned to approach first contact with caution. Every word could be misunderstood, every gesture misread. And yet, somehow, he had made the single mistake that could unravel centuries of diplomacy. Shathara's silence lasted longer than any human could comfortably bear. The crew behind him shifted in the background, uneasy in their uniforms, whispering quietly among themselves. Elias knew that in the vast silence of space, a moment like this could stretch into eternity. He cleared his throat, hoping a small sound might break the tension, but Shathara's gaze did not waver. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was not loud, but it carried weight, like a stone thrown into a still pond.
"You noticed our curves," she said. There was no accusation in her tone, but it carried a question that demanded more than a simple answer.
"Yes," Elias replied cautiously, trying to gauge her reaction. They are elegant. I mean, technically, the whole structure is remarkable. The way it channels energy through the frame, it's very sophisticated." He tried to sound diplomatic, careful, but now he saw the slightest twitch at the corner of Shathara's mouth, almost like a smile, or perhaps the twitch of a nerve that meant trouble. She leaned back slightly, folding her hands together. "You spoke casually," she said, as if it were merely aesthetic. "You do not understand the significance." Elias swallowed. "I didn't mean disrespect. I meant humans appreciate design, function, form." "It's a compliment in our culture." Shathara's eyes sharpened. "Design? Function?" "These are only words for you. You do not grasp the principle." He had the sense that whatever principle she meant was far beyond human understanding. And yet, the way she spoke, it was clear this principle was at the heart of her civilization. One of the human analysts, a young linguist named Mara, whispered urgently into her comm. "Sir, I think we might have stumbled onto a major cultural secret." She's not angry. She's intrigued, maybe even alarmed.
Elias nodded subtly.
That made sense. Humanity had a way of noticing things without understanding them. Sometimes our ignorance looked like insight. Shathara stood, her movements smooth and deliberate. "Follow me," she commanded. Her tone was not polite. It was firm, an order that left no room for argument. Elias and his team obeyed, following her down the winding corridors of the ship. The walls pulsed faintly with energy. Not lights, but vibrations that seemed to resonate with something deep in the human bones. They entered a vast chamber, far larger than anything the human crew had seen. It was a lattice of curves and arcs, structures that seemed to bend light and gravity in impossible ways. Elias's mouth went dry. This was no decoration. It was a living architecture of physics itself.
"You see," Shathara said, her voice echoing slightly, "our species has built itself around curves. Curvature is the language of the universe."
Those who understand it survive. Those who do not perish.
Elias swallowed again. "You mean the hull's shape?"
"It's more than design?" "More than design," Shathara confirmed. "It is control."
"It is understanding. Our cities, our ships, our very thought patterns follow the principle of curves. Every choice, every calculation, every decision. Curvature guides us, humans." "You noticed this instantly?" "How?" That question hit Elias like a wave. They had noticed something instinctively, yes. Human engineers had studied alien technology for years. Human mathematicians had played with orbital trajectories and warp calculations, but they had never thought of it in terms of philosophy or reverence. To humans, curves were tools, not sacred laws. I don't know, Elias said truthfully. We see patterns. We use them to survive. Maybe that's what you mean. Shathara's head tilted slightly, a gesture that seemed almost human, though impossibly precise. You see patterns without reverence, without respect. Yet you survive. You manipulate curves, bend them as you wish, and endure. That is unexpected. Elias felt a strange mixture of fear and pride. Humanity had never been particularly reverent. They had never bowed to physics or accepted limits without question. And now, Shathara's species recognized that same reckless adaptability as something remarkable. Why show us this? Mara asked, softly, her eyes wide. Why now? Shathara's gaze swept the room, lingering on the lattice of arcs that defied human imagination. Because, she said slowly, you have the potential to understand more than you realize. Most species who encounter these principles fail immediately. They cannot survive the demands of curvature. Humans, perhaps you can.
Elias's mind raced. Potential for what? To do what we do.
To see the universe as a living structure, not a void. To bend its flows without breaking them. To survive where others fail. The human crew exchanged uneasy glances. The words were intoxicating, almost overwhelming, to manipulate the universe itself. It sounded like fantasy, and yet, the evidence before them was undeniable. The alien structures bent light, gravity, and energy in ways humans had only dreamed of. Shathara continued, her voice steady and measured. Curves are life. Curves are death. You notice them casually, and that has changed how we view you. You may be different from what we expected. Elias felt a rush of conflicting emotions. Relief that she was not angry. Pride that humans had made an impression. Fear because the principles she spoke of were far beyond their understanding. Mara spoke again, carefully. Sir, this is incredible. If they teach us, we could advance human technology centuries in a matter of weeks, maybe months.
Yes, Elias said quietly.
But we have to be careful. The moment we misunderstand, the moment we misstep, they could see us as unworthy. Or worse. Shathara walked toward the center of the chamber, placing her hands on a glowing arc that pulsed with energy. Curves demand respect, she said, not merely observation. You have observed, but you have also adapted. That is unique. That is human. The words struck Elias. Human, different, adaptable. The species had survived the harshness of Earth, conquered diseases, survived natural disasters, and now, in the vast emptiness of space, they were still learning to adapt. And now, in this alien chamber, the same instincts had allowed them to survive the unspoken test of understanding. Do you mean humans can learn this? Elias asked, cautiously. Shathara looked at him, her eyes reflecting the glowing curves around them. Perhaps. But you must approach it with understanding, not just calculation, not just survival. Reverence, observation, adaptation. You have the potential to surpass us, but only if you are willing to see the universe itself as living curves, not a puzzle to solve.
Elias nodded, feeling the weight of her words. Humans had always been bold.
Sometimes reckless, sometimes foolish. But now, those same traits might allow them to achieve something no other species could. The chamber seemed to hum as Shathara's words sank in. Every curve, every line of energy seemed to pulse with life. Elias could feel it in his bones. Humanity was at the threshold of understanding something vast, something terrifyingly beautiful. And now, Shathara said, her voice almost gentle, we will observe how you respond. You have stumbled onto principles most cannot even perceive.
Let us see how humans will adapt. Elias felt a chill.
Observation, test, challenge. It was clear that the aliens were not merely teaching, they were testing. And the test would demand more than intelligence. It would demand courage, creativity, and the uniquely human ability to survive through imperfection. Mara whispered, barely audible, "Sir, we've just crossed a line." The line between student and something else. "Yes," Elias said quietly, eyes fixed on the glowing lattice of curves. "And I think humanity is ready." The tension in the chamber did not ease. The humans had not been scolded nor praised. They had been noticed, and that was far more dangerous. Elias understood that the moment they stepped back onto their own ship, nothing would be the same. Humanity had touched a secret of the cosmos, an understanding that few could survive. And yet, as he looked at his crew, he felt a surge of pride. They had survived the first challenge simply by existing, by observing, by adapting. The aliens may control the curves of the universe, but humans had the unpredictable, unstoppable ability to endure. Shathara's gaze met his one last time before she turned and walked away, leaving the humans alone in the chamber. The curves continued to pulse, a living reminder of the knowledge they had just glimpsed. Elias turned to his crew, and for the first time he allowed a small, cautious smile. Humanity had stumbled into the unknown, and they had survived. The human crew returned to their ship in silence. The corridors of the alien flagship seemed alive with the memory of the curves, the energy lines that had pulsed under their feet. Commander Elias Rowe led them, his mind heavy with the weight of what they had witnessed. The ship hummed under them, a sound that seemed almost like breathing. Every movement reminded him that they had just glimpsed something far beyond human comprehension, and that the aliens were watching, waiting. Mara walked beside him, her eyes wide, still absorbing the magnitude of the experience. "Sir, I don't know if I can describe it," she said quietly. "It's like everything we thought we knew about physics is small."
Insignificant? Elias nodded.
He had felt the same way. Humanity had always measured the universe with instruments, equations, and theories, but here, in the presence of the alien technology, it was clear that their understanding was primitive. And yet, somehow, the humans had survived the encounter. Somehow, they had been noticed, not with hostility, but with curiosity. Once back in the briefing room, the crew gathered around the holographic table. They displayed the images and scans they had managed to capture before being allowed into the chamber. The images were breathtaking, arcs of energy bending light in ways that seemed impossible. The curvature of the structures defied everything the human scientists thought they knew. Lieutenant Vance, the ship's engineer, leaned over the table. "Sir, look at these energy readings. The way the arcs bend gravity. It's beyond anything we've ever seen. I mean, if we tried to replicate this, we'd destroy the ship, maybe the crew too."
That's what makes it so remarkable, Elias said.
They don't just understand curves. They live by them. Every movement, every calculation is part of this pattern. And yet, we noticed it instantly. Not perfectly, but enough to survive. Mara frowned, tapping her chin. "It's terrifying, in a way. If they had seen us fail, if we had misstepped even slightly, they could have, I don't know, ended this right here, or worse, left us to learn in isolation." Elias exhaled slowly.
Yes, that's why this is both an opportunity and a risk.
"They're testing us, observing how we adapt." And humans. Humans are unpredictable. That's why we survived. There was a silence as the crew absorbed his words. Humans had never been perfect. They had never followed rules without question. They made mistakes, took risks, and adapted when everything seemed lost. And that very imperfection, this chaotic resilience, was what the aliens now recognized as a strength. "Sir," Mara said softly, "do you think they trust us?"
Elias shook his head slowly.
"Not trust exactly, but they respect us, maybe even fear us a little. Fear is the wrong word. They recognize that we can survive where others might fail. That makes us." "Interesting." The captain's communicator buzzed. It was the alien liaison, Shathara. Elias pressed the receiver. "Ro," she said. "What? You have returned safely. That is good. We will continue our observations. But now, the challenge becomes yours. You must demonstrate understanding, not merely survival." Elias exchanged glances with Mara and Vance. "Understanding of what, exactly?" he asked cautiously. Shathara's voice was calm but firm.
"The principles you observed. The curves."
"You know them in practice, but not in essence. To survive among us, to progress further, you must perceive them as we do. Not as tools, not as structures, but as life itself." Elias felt a chill. This was no simple lesson in physics or engineering. This was something deeper, something that demanded a shift in perception. Humans had always adapted, yes, but to understand curves as life itself would require a leap beyond instinct. Over the next several days, the human crew began intensive study. Every scan, every reading, every holographic model of the alien Orcs was analyzed and reanalyzed. They ran simulations, attempting to mimic the patterns they had seen. But the results were inconsistent. Sometimes the Orcs behaved predictably. Other times they warped in ways the models could not anticipate. Lieutenant Vance frowned, rubbing his eyes. "It's like the Orcs respond to intent, not just energy. Like they sense how we're thinking about them." Mara nodded. "Yes, it's almost as if the curves are alive, and we're not just observing them. We're interacting with them." Elias leaned back in his chair, deep in thought. Humans had always been capable of incredible intuition. They could adapt to unpredictable situations, make decisions with incomplete information, and turn even failures into survival. But here, the margin for error was thin. A single miscalculation could destroy their ship, or worse, draw alien suspicion. And yet, the more they studied, the more they realized something extraordinary. Their human intuition, their instinct for survival, allowed them to perceive patterns that the aliens themselves might have overlooked. Humans did not revere curves in the same way. They treated them as tools, but in doing so, they found new applications, new ways to manipulate them. Mara's voice cut through the silence. "Sir, I think we're starting to see it. We're not following their methods exactly, but we're discovering things they might not have considered. It's different, but effective." Elias felt a spark of hope. Humanity had always thrived where predictability failed. Their unpredictability, their willingness to take risks, and their relentless creativity allowed them to survive in environments that would have crushed more cautious species. Days turned into weeks as the human crew continued their work. They ran simulations that tested the limits of the alien curvature principles. They built prototypes that could manipulate energy flows in ways inspired by the alien structures. And with each experiment, they improved. Not by copying the aliens, but by applying human ingenuity to alien concepts. Shathara observed them silently during this time. Her presence always felt but rarely seen. When she did appear, her gaze was intense, studying every decision, every calculation. It became clear that the aliens were not merely teaching, they were measuring. assessing and learning from the humans as well. One evening, as Elias reviewed the latest simulation results, Mara approached him. "Sir, I think they might be learning from us too. Every time we find a new method, it seems their energy lattice shifts slightly, as if adapting to our experiments." Elias nodded slowly.
Yes, humans are not just learning, they are teaching without realizing it.
Our unpredictability, it's contagious. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. Humans had always adapted to survive, but now they were influencing a species that had mastered curves for millennia. They were not merely students, they were participants in a dynamic exchange. Shathara's voice came over the communicator. "Your progress is unexpected. Humans are different than we anticipated. You do not merely observe. You alter the principles without reverence, yet survive. That is remarkable." Elias smiled faintly, though the weight of responsibility pressed on him. "Thank you," he replied. "But we still have much to learn, and we will continue to adapt. Adaptation is not enough," Shathara warned. "You must understand. To survive among us, to progress further, you must perceive curves as we do, not tools, not obstacles, but life itself." Elias nodded. Understood. He felt the challenge keenly. Humanity had survived by instinct and ingenuity, but this required a transformation of perception. In the following days, the crew intensified their study, not just of the arcs and structures, but of the principles behind them. They experimented with energy flows, gravity manipulation, and spatial distortion. Each attempt brought new insights and new failures. Yet through every failure they learned, adapted, and improved. Mara spoke during one long session. "Sir, I think I understand. It's not just about manipulating the curves. It's about thinking in terms of curves. Every decision, every action, every calculation, they are all part of a continuous flow. If we break that flow, the system reacts. But if we move with it, it responds to us." Elias felt a surge of pride. Humans had always survived by thinking creatively, by seeing connections others missed, by adapting when rules seemed rigid. Now, they were learning to interact with the universe itself, not as conquerors, but as participants in a living system. And yet, the challenge remained. The aliens were watching, waiting to see if humanity could truly understand, not merely survive, but integrate these principles into their thinking, their decisions, their very approach to existence. Elias looked around at his crew, each one focused, determined, and exhausted. They had already achieved something extraordinary. They had survived the first test, adapted to the unexpected, and begun to understand principles that no human had ever comprehended before. But the journey was far from over. Humanity's greatest strength, their unpredictability, their ability to thrive through imperfection, was now being measured against the universe itself. And as Elias stared at the glowing energy lattice projected in the center of the room, he realized that the true challenge was only just beginning. The humans had survived the first encounter. They had adapted. They had begun to understand, but the aliens were not finished observing. The real test, one that would push humanity to its limits, was still ahead. And in that moment, Elias knew something profound. Humans did not need to be perfect. They only needed to be relentless, adaptable, and unyielding. That was enough to survive where others would fail. And perhaps, just perhaps, to thrive where no other species could. The humans had worked tirelessly for weeks. Every day brought new challenges, new failures, and new insights. Commander Elias Rowe watched his crew with quiet pride. Each member of the team had grown in ways he had never imagined. They were no longer simply engineers, scientists, and officers. They had become explorers of a new kind, venturing into the unknown, not just with tools, but with their minds and hearts. The alien liaison, Shathara, had been observing silently all along. She rarely spoke, but when she did, it carried the weight of her civilization. Her words were measured, precise, and always intentional. And now, after weeks of observation, she summoned Elias and his team to the Chamber of Curves once again. The room was as magnificent as ever, the arcs of energy bending light and gravity in ways that seemed almost alive. But this time, the humans did not feel fear. They felt challenge. They had learned, adapted, and begun to understand. And now, it was time to demonstrate what humanity could do. Shatharada stood at the center of the chamber, her presence commanding but calm. You have survived. You have observed. You have begun to understand. But survival is not enough. Understanding is not enough. Now you must integrate. You must move as one with the curves, not as observers, but as participants. Elias stepped forward. We are ready, he said. We will do whatever it takes. Shathara's eyes flickered, a sign of approval, or perhaps curiosity. Then, let us begin. The challenge was unlike anything the humans had encountered. The curves of the chamber shifted in response to their movements, testing their coordination, precision, and perception. Every step, every adjustment, every decision affected the flow of energy. A single miscalculation could disrupt the lattice, creating instability. But the humans approached it differently from what the aliens expected. They did not move perfectly. They did not follow rules exactly. They adapted. They experimented. They learned from each small error and corrected it with intuition and ingenuity. Where the aliens relied on precision, the humans relied on adaptability. Where the aliens expected uniformity, the humans brought creativity. Mara led a small team, adjusting energy flows in one section of the lattice. Lieutenant Vance manipulated gravity fields in another. Elias coordinated their efforts, not with rigid orders, but with suggestions, allowing the crew to improvise as needed. And slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the chamber began to respond. The arcs of energy pulsed in harmony with the humans' movements. The curves seemed to bend toward them, to accommodate their improvisations rather than resist them. Shathara watched, her expression unreadable. But the energy lattice itself seemed to ripple with approval. You are different, she said finally. Humans do not fear imperfection. You embrace it. You bend the universe not by mastering it perfectly, but by adapting to it. That is unexpected? Elias smiled. We have never been perfect, he said. But we survive. And we learn. That's how humans have always grown. Shathara considered his words. You speak the truth. Most species cannot endure without control, without exactness. But you thrive on adaptability. That is why you are remarkable. The humans continued their work, moving through the chamber as if it were a dance. Every mistake became a lesson. Every success built on the previous one. Slowly, the lattice of curves seemed to resonate with their presence. It was no longer a test. It was a collaboration. Hours passed, the crew worked tirelessly, but they did not falter. They had learned to read the subtle changes in the arcs, to anticipate the energy shifts, to integrate their actions with the principles of curvature. And finally, after what felt like an eternity, the chamber reached a state of perfect harmony. The arcs of energy glowed brighter, flowing in a continuous, seamless pattern. The entire room pulsed with life, responding to the humans' presence as if it had recognized them as equals. Shathara stepped forward, her eyes glowing faintly with energy. You have achieved what few species could even attempt. You have integrated with the principles of curvature, not through perfection, but through adaptability, creativity, and persistence. You have succeeded. Elias felt a surge of relief and pride. The humans had not only survived the test, they had surpassed it. They had demonstrated the very quality that made humanity unique, the ability to adapt, to thrive through imperfection, and to find solutions where none seemed possible. Mara stepped forward, her eyes shining. "Sir, we did it!" "We actually did it?" "Yes," Elias said quietly.
We did, and we did it together. Shathara's voice echoed through the chamber.
"Your species is unlike any we have encountered. You do not follow rules blindly. You do not fear failure. You innovate, you adapt, and you endure. That is why you are worthy of partnership." The words struck Elias deeply. Humans had never been the strongest, the fastest, or the most precise, but their resilience, creativity, and adaptability had allowed them to survive where others might fail. And now, the aliens recognized it. Shathara continued, her tone almost gentle. Humanity does not need to dominate through perfection. You dominate through persistence, through ingenuity, through the refusal to be broken by circumstance. That is your strength. That is why you are remarkable. Elias felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The humans had not only learned from the aliens, they had shown that their way of surviving, their way of thinking, was a force in itself. The chamber pulsed one final time, the energy flows converging into a single harmonious arc. It was a symbol of unity, of understanding, of the collaboration between humans and the alien civilization. Shathara approached Elias one last time. "You spoke of our curves casually when we first met. That could have been an insult, but it was more. It revealed something about your species. You perceive patterns without fear. You adapt without hesitation. You survive without reverence, yet with respect for life. That is extraordinary." Elias nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "We have learned much from you, and I believe we have much more to learn. But I also believe humanity has something unique to offer, something that no other species can." Shathara's gaze softened, almost imperceptibly. "Yes, that is clear now. You are a class-you-bounded species. You have the potential to redefine not only technology, but understanding itself. To survive where others would fail, and perhaps to thrive where others could not even exist." Elias felt a surge of pride. Humans had always survived against impossible odds. They had built civilizations on harsh planets, endured pandemics, faced extinction-level events, and emerged stronger. And now, in the vast reaches of space, they had shown that same resilience to an alien species that had mastered the universe itself. The human crew gathered around him, their faces a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. They had been tested, challenged, and pushed beyond anything they had imagined, and they had risen to the occasion not because they were perfect, but because they were human. Shathara stepped back, allowing them a moment of victory. "Go," she said. "Return to your ship. Continue to learn, to explore, to survive. You have shown us the true power of humanity, not in strength, not in precision, but in adaptability, creativity, and the unyielding will to endure. That is your legacy. That is your gift." Elias felt the weight of her words settle over him. Humanity had been tested, not just in skill, but in spirit. And they had proven themselves worthy, not because they were flawless, but because they were relentless, imaginative, and unafraid of the unknown. As the humans left the chamber, the arcs of energy pulsed gently behind them, a living reminder of the principles they had learned and the species that now recognized their worth. They had crossed a threshold, not just in understanding alien technology, but in demonstrating the very essence of what made humanity remarkable. Elias stood at the entrance to the chamber, looking back one last time. "We survived," he said softly. "Not perfectly, But we survived. And we'll keep surviving no matter what comes next.
Mara smiled. That's human, isn't it? Yes, Elias said, a glint of determination in his eyes.
That's human now? The universe will see what that truly means. And with that, the humans returned to their ship, ready to continue their journey among the stars. They had faced the unknown, adapted, and prevailed. They had shown that the strength of humanity was not in perfection, but in resilience, ingenuity, and the unwavering will to endure. And somewhere, deep within the energy lattice of the alien chamber, Shathara watched them go, understanding fully that humanity was a species unlike any other, a species that would shape the future of the universe in ways even they could not yet imagine. The humans had stumbled onto something extraordinary. They had been tested, they had adapted, and they had emerged stronger. And in doing so, they had proven the very essence of HFY. Humanity survives, humanity thrives, and humanity will never be underestimated again.